A very fun Friday edition of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast here on June 17th, 2022. My name is JJ Jackson, and on today's show, my good buddy Brian Horace at Duke Blogger on Twitter talks all things Duke men's basketball as we continue to navigate the offseason. It's going to be a fun one. Let's get right to it.
Dick Vitale, hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with JJ Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So excited to have you here with us on the show today. A lot to discuss on today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils. Make sure that you follow and subscribe this podcast wherever you get them. We're available on all podcast platforms. If, in fact, you're listening on the Apple Podcast platform, please take a moment, press pause, type out a 5-star rating and review. It means a lot when you do that. Apple loves the algorithm of words behind the 5-star review, and that means a lot for us here. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you. The show is available there. Be sure to follow and subscribe. Turn on your post notifications. You know when we're posting each and every day, and it's going to be a whole lot of fun to talk about Duke basketball and Duke football as we get closer to fall and the start of another academic year for the Blue Devils. Again, my name is JJ Jackson. You can follow me on Twitter @_JJ_Jackson_, and the show is available on Twitter as well @LO_Blue Devils. Without further ado, let me go ahead and welcome in my guest for today's show, and it's a very good friend of mine, Brian Horace at Duke Blogger, back with us for another visit here on the program. Brian, what's going on, man?
Not too much. How are you doing?
Very well. Excited to get you back on the show. I was reminding you, and I want to remind our listeners as well, we haven't been able to chat since the end of April. So been a little bit over a month and a half or so since you've been able to be on the podcast with us, and want to talk about the offseason. A quite different storyline for Duke men's basketball now compared to where we were at the last time we spoke, as guys were still waiting to make their NBA draft declarations. Now we know who's staying, who's going, and that sort of thing. So we really do have a better idea of what the basketball roster for next season will look like.
Oh, yes, definitely. It took a while, but Jon Scheyer pulled it all together, and almost at the last possible minute, right before people starting to filter into school, and a couple of guys are still not there quite yet, but they're on their way. But things are different, and it's a whole new roster.
This is our Friday edition of the podcast. So if we fast forward 1 week from today, we will have 5 Duke Blue Devils that wake up and know their NBA team that they're going to be playing for. As again, the draft is now 6 days away, coming up on Thursday, June 23rd. So as we get closer to the draft, how optimistic are you about all 5 of those guys' chances to not only get drafted, but end up in good spots?
I think there's a really good chance. Listening to all of the the chatter that's coming out of the the workouts and teams positioning themselves, it looks really good for obviously Paolo should go top 3 or 4. I feel like Mark Williams and AJ Griffin are right there as well in the top 10 to 15 range. That's going to be good. The only outliers are the ones that we're not 100% sure about, obviously, are Trevor Keels and Wendell Moore. But even if they do end up dropping to a later round or second round, they still could end up on teams where they could contribute, So, but there's still a chance they could all go in the first round. It's still a possibility, but honestly, you never know. I'm not a huge fan of all of the the draft, pre-draft stuff. I don't really think it's based on much fact. So I don't think anyone knows, and I don't think any NBA experts are giving out any information to these mock drafts. Why would they?
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, and again, that's why we want to just fast forward 1 week from today, be like, all right, we're waking up and we know that this guy's going here and this player's going there. But when we talk about those other 2 guys, again, the number that we've talked about ad nauseum at this point, 5. That is 5 first-round picks that Kentucky had back in 2010, and it doesn't necessarily look like it's going in that direction for Duke. As you're saying, it might be a second round for Wendell Moore Jr. and for Trevor Keels. But a player like Wendell Moore Jr., what is an NBA team getting when they draft Wendell? Like, what really impressed you throughout his college career?
Well, the way he improved each year. I mean, he's still a really young guy. He's still like 20 years old. He's still fairly young for being, where he is. And on the court, he's I've always called him the Swiss Army knife. He does a lot of things well, and he's going to give you max effort. He's not a guy that has to be a scorer. He's a guy that can do other things. He's a bigger guard. He can rebound. He can push. He can, he's become a better shooter. I mean, he's really raised his stock as a shooter in the last season. So I think with him, you're getting a well-rounded player, a guy that can come in and even lead. And even as a young guy, he's had to be a leader for a few years now. And so I think with him, you're definitely getting a versatile player that I think definitely belongs in the league on a team as a either a two guard or a guy bring off the bench to as a backup point even.
Yeah, no kidding. And that's why I'm so excited for a team that drafts Wendell Moore, improving his 3-point percentage by nearly 10% from his sophomore to junior season at 6'5". The wingspan is really impressive as well, and he's such a great defender. Swiss Army knife is the best kind of description out there for Wendell. Same question, but Trevor Keels then.
Yeah, again, Trevor is a young guy, just like Wendell, even, obviously younger. His freshman season, he obviously had ups and downs, but the potential you could see there. I mean, he's, I call him an emerging shooter. He didn't shoot well, but when he gets going, he gets going. And the good thing about Trevor is he's not only defined by that 3-point shot. He's a guy that can get into the lane, make plays. He's strong. He's in, I don't know if you've seen the latest, the way he looks now, he's gotten himself into much better shape. I mean, he's looking, real powerful now. And I think that kind of thing, can definitely translate into the league. He can play either guard position. I think he's deceptively quicker than you might think. He's, for a big guy, he moves well. And, I think he's a first round talent, honestly. I mean, it doesn't mean he's going to go in the first round, but I think the talent is there. The potential is there. And we know the NBA drafts some potential more so than production. So he's going to make a team really happy, I think.
No kidding. No kidding about that. Super excited to see what Trevor Keels is able to do at the next level. So those guys are heading off to the NBA. You've got the other three, like we mentioned, Paolo Banchero, AJ Griffin, and Mark Williams. They've all received green room invites. So they have the opportunity to be present there, to walk across the stage, to shake the commissioner's hand. And what fun that will be to celebrate for those guys and their family moving forward. Brian Horace is joining us here on Locked On Blue Devils. We'll start to transition to next year's squad and what that's looking like coming up here in just a moment. Today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils is brought to you by our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, news, and odds, including this year's basketball championship matchup, the NHL Hockey Conference Finals and Stanley Cup Finals, Major League Baseball, and, of course, all the latest fighting news from MMA and UFC to boxing. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, and that includes live betting, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. We have an important favor to ask you. We've put together a survey so we can learn more about listeners like you and make your favorite Locked On podcast even better. This is your opportunity to tell us what you like and don't like about Locked On Podcasts. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It won't take very long, and everyone that completes the survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. To take our audience survey, go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Thanks for your help. As we move forward here on today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils, again, JJ Jackson alongside Brian Horace at Duke Blogger on Twitter. So, Brian, we start to look towards next year's team. People were really waiting to see Trevor Keels' decision there at the end. There was the AJ Green chatter, the transfer from Northern Iowa, who ultimately decides to stay in the NBA draft. He won't be playing college basketball next year either. And then all of a sudden, news breaks that Tyrese Proctor is reclassifying from 2023 up to 2022. What in the world? That's just so awesome. Weren't expecting that to happen for Jon Scheyer as he gets set for his first season as head coach.
Yeah, there'd been rumors, surrounding that for, well over a month or so, whether that was just, people hoping and wishing, or there was some, substance to it. Either way, Coach Scheyer, had ongoing conversations with Tyrese and his family about there possibly being, some room for him this coming season. And I think with the exit of Trevor Keels being official, I think Proctor saw, the opportunity. I know they talked to him about being able to play through his mistakes and things like that. So I think, him coming in and also possibly maybe not even getting to play the season after when he was scheduled to come in, because obviously he's a guy that can go early into the NBA, almost like a Shaden Sharp did for Kentucky. So who never actually saw the floor.
Right.
I think there were some strategy behind this move. I think, especially for Proctor, getting able to get in, on a team where he can contribute right away and get himself possibly into the NBA a little bit earlier.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, the fact that there was that possibility out there that he might not be playing for Duke next season was something that, quite honestly, I didn't want to see. I wanted him to get to wear the Duke jersey. It's one thing for a guy to commit to a school, but then to never get to see them play, it's kind of hard to certainly claim them as one of yours. So thrilled to see that Tyrese Proctor is going to be joining the team, coming over from Australia. We've seen those international players come over to Durham and play for the Blue Devils. They're just more experienced in a lot of ways, and I think he's going to be able to fit right in. I'm trying to think about guys that have reclassified and came into school a year earlier than expected, and I'm going all the way back to right before the 2010 season that Duke won the national championship. I know Andre Dawkins was going into his freshman season, and he was one of those first guys that I can remember deciding to come into college a year earlier. It's always an interesting decision. You never really hear about it in any walk of life other than athletics. That someone's like, you know what, let me start that college thing a little bit earlier. But I think these guys are certainly ready to make moves like that.
Yeah, agreed. Also, RJ Barrett reclassed to come in. I think with international prospects, I think it makes a little bit more sense. I think their training is a whole different level than it is here. And I think, Proctor being able to play at the NBA Academy last year, and those experiences, I think, probably ready him a little more than most to come in a little early than maybe a kid that's coming in in America and going through our high school and AAU system.
So in addition to Tyrese Proctor, Duke was also still had an open scholarship available, and Jacob Grandison is the guy that's going to occupy that scholarship. Duke has already announced that he's going to join the roster. They've handed out jersey numbers for all the guys, which is really exciting. And Grandison transfers from Illinois a couple of seasons at Holy Cross as well. And you've had a lot of good tidbits and profiles and shot charts on Twitter that you've been posting. And again, check out DukeBlogger.com for all your stuff, Brian. But this was a big get for Duke to get Grandison, an experienced guard.
I agree. It checks off several boxes for the Blue Devils. One being experience, being a guy that's 24 years old or so, having played in the Big Ten, he's used to the physicality that he's going to see in the ACC. He's a bigger, guard / forward, at 6'6", was like 210-ish, 205, 210. That's something that, the Blue Devils did not really have in the backcourt, someone with a little bit of size. And he brings shooting. He's really the only proven shooter on this roster right now. And, he's the only one that's actually, been able to do it steadily in college. Other than that, you have obviously Jalen Blakes, who hasn't really played very much, and Jeremy Roach, who's, shooting is still sort of emerging. So I think it definitely checks off the boxes for 3-point shooting, as well as just getting some experience in that backcourt.
Experience is key, certainly when you've got a younger team coming in. And for Grandison, he's going to wear number 13 on his jersey. So joining the Blue Devils, he's got the outside shot. There are numbers out there that the corner spot is something that he absolutely loves. The percentage skyrockets there from the corner. And we know ball movement. We know guys that can put their head down and get to the rim. You're always kind of looking for the threat of somebody to kick it out to the corner.
Exactly. I think he's that guy for Duke right now. And I think the way that Scheyer is going to want to play is all about getting guys open, getting guys to their spots, getting shots, setting picks, things like that. A lot of movement. So I think he's going to fit right into this lineup.
Let's start to wrap up our conversation and look more at next year's roster now that it's entirely set. We know what it's going to look like moving forward, and we'll do that in a moment with Brian Horace here, again, at Duke Blogger on Twitter. Be sure to give him a follow there. Today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils brought to you by our good pals over at Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. You have computers that have access to rockauto.com, so just go there. You could save time and money when using Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are reliably low for every customer. For example, the Honda Odyssey fuel pump is $353 from a chain store compared to $216 from Rock Auto. Over a $100 difference. Make sure you check out everything that they have, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution for your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On Blue Devils in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Visit rockauto.com. Moving forward here on today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils, JJ Jackson alongside Brian Horace at Duke Blogger on Twitter and dukeblogger.com. If people put that into their URL right now, Brian, what are some of the things that they're going to be able to see over at your blog and your site?
Definitely all the updates from the season and the off season so far. Obviously, all the new additions are mentioned, as well as information on Duke's new hires. Obviously, the new coach Jay Lucas. You got Rachel Baker coming in, so there's a little bit of everything.
Tell me about the Rachel Baker hire, a general manager for a men's basketball staff. We've talked about it feels very forward thinking in my eyes from what Scheyer's been able to do.
Yeah, now I mean, obviously with NIL being a huge part of the attraction of playing college basketball, in addition to obviously getting your education, getting your self-esteem and preparing for the next level, it's hard for teams to compete if they don't have a good package for NIL, and being able to navigate those waters is something that Duke, even being the powerhouse that they've been in recruiting, you can very easily lose those high-level recruits if you don't have something in place. And I think hiring Rachel, with her experience in the business world, her experience with Nike, was a home run hit for Scheyer in terms of getting Duke, more prepared and freeing him from having to worry about that stuff and actually just coach his team. So
yeah, it feels like he'll be able to greatly benefit from that. And now that the roster is kind of set and you could start to look at recruiting, I know the contact period has officially opened up for the class of 2024, and Duke's been sending out scholarships in that regard. So they're always 3-4 steps ahead of everybody else in college basketball, it feels like, and a reason why they've been able to be so successful in that recruiting department. But you start to look at this year's roster with Grandison coming in, Tyrese Proctor joining the freshmen that are going to be on hand. Jeremy Roach is such an experienced point guard. I mean, there's still going to be ACC championship expectations for the Duke men's basketball team. All in all, what's your assessment of this roster?
Yeah, I think obviously it's a young team. A lot of the what you call the gamers are young guys, but I think Scheyer's done a good job of sort of backfilling some age to put behind those guys. Obviously, like Ryan Young coming in from Northwestern to play behind Derek Lively is going to be a huge benefit for him, both in terms of like going against a bigger guy in practice to prepare for like the Baycots of the ACC, things like that. Having obviously Cale Catchings there as a physical sort of a small ball forward to go with Mark Mitchell, to sort of get him prepared to face those heavy minutes against bigger guys. So I think this roster has, in some ways, is better than last year's roster in that there are guys that have done it before, and obviously a lot of the last year's team was a lot of it was new, a lot of it was brand new, and you still have that this year. But I think you also have a much more well-rounded roster this year. I think you have a lot of guys that can do a lot of different things, but you also have the age to back that up as well. So I think, this particular roster is definitely intriguing, and I think Scheyer's done a masterful job. Even though it took up until June to get it done, I think he's done as well a job as you can, considering how much they've lost.
Yeah. We're already seeing guys on campus. We've seen K Academy. We know that the first Jon Scheyer basketball camp has kicked off, and that's going for the youth, which is really exciting. I can remember my days growing up as a basketball fan, and my parents being able to send my brother and I off to Coach K basketball camp, and it was the coolest week in the world to me. And I still think back on those memories and that sort of thing. But we talk about going into next season. I think that's an important part as well. We talk about 2 seasons ago, that Duke men's basketball team, as we're still kind of navigating the pandemic and COVID-19, at that point, they weren't able to spend as much time together in the offseason. When you've got a whole new group of players coming together, a lot of times it really does come back to those summer months. And Brian, can these guys get into a gym and just play pickup? Like, in a way, that sounds silly, but that is so important in a sport like basketball. We saw it benefit this past season with the run all the way to the Final Four. But this summer, these guys get to play pickup together, and that's a big win.
Exactly. I mean, a lot of, building a team is building that camaraderie, sort of figuring out each other's games and how that's going to translate on the court when you all play together. So I think these summer months, June, July, August, these are where you really get your team on the same page.
All right, we're getting set for the upcoming men's basketball season for Duke. We know what the roster looks like. We're starting to count down the days at this point until Jon Scheyer kind of takes over the reins and takes this program, hopefully at championship aspirations with sights there on 6. So looking at this Duke men's staff, we talked about the Jay Lucas hire, Rachel Baker coming into her new general manager role. Mike Schrage comes in. You feel pretty good about the coaching staff?
Oh, without a doubt. That's a heck of a staff right there. Obviously, Lucas brings a lot of experience on the recruiting trail. He, gives us a sort of a pipeline into the South a little bit. Emil is a high riser right now. I mean, everyone, raves about his ability to teach the game to younger kids. I mean, and considering he's been playing, just not that long ago, and being a guy that's not even 30 yet, I think that's helpful. Schrage brings a level of experience. He knows the Duke program. He's been a head coach as well, and Carewall's he's just the man. He's the guy. He's a really great guy. He's good with the kids. He has a real insight into AAU, a real insight into like what's going on, in the high school level. And he's another guy that's done it, on the highest level. So I think this staff in particular, being as young as they are and as plugged in as they are, and they're all good teachers. And so I think it's a heck of a staff.
Brian, I appreciate you taking some time to chat with me and kind of preview what next year's roster could look like. Looking forward to more conversations with you as basketball season continues to near. Where can people find your work and support you over at Duke Blogger?
Certainly. Visit dukeblogger.com. That's where the articles end up. And on Twitter at Duke Blogger. I'm pretty active there. Come and have a conversation.
I love it. Nearing 6K over there. Get my guy up to all those followers. Give him a follow. Follow us on Twitter at _JJ_Jackson_ and the show on Twitter at LO_Blue Devils. Brian, this was a blast. Looking forward to talking to you again soon, okay?
Yes, sir. Take care.
That is Brian Horace joining us on today's edition of Locked On Blue Devils, and that's going to do it for our show today. That wraps up our week here on Locked On Blue Devils, a Mailbag Monday edition coming your way on Monday. Your questions, I answer them. Send them to us on Twitter and also send them to us on an email if you'd like, lockedonbluedevils@gmail.com. That's going to do it for today's show. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you on Monday. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.